good afternoon. I feel like I should be barefoot at the moment. But I'll try and exude some passion nonetheless. How many people here? About 200? 200? We've got 200 champions of change, and we need every one of you. 200 people who can make a difference to a First Nations child in a community in our far north. Whether they happen to be in northwestern Ontario, Shoal Lake 39A, or Kashechewan or Attawapiskat, or Moosonee Moose Factory on the James Bay coast. I want to take just a few moments of your time and ask for your help to start doing something about the challenge, the horror, the terror of youth suicide in First Nations communities. We have in Ontario, in our far north First Nations communities, youth suicide rates that are among the highest in the world. In Ontario, in Canada, one of the richest places in the world, a place of so much, we have some of the highest youth suicide rates in the world. And we need to do something about that. But the something that I'm going to ask you to do today is not the something that you probably think that the government is going to talk about. I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But I'm from the government, and the sad reality is that one of the reasons we have very high youth suicide rates is what governments have done. Oh, they're not alone. There are lots who can lay claim to some contribution to these terrifyingly high youth suicide rates. We have our governmental approach to our First Nations people, our First Peoples. We have treaty obligations which may or may not have been fulfilled. We have the vestiges of residential schools, where we, governments, decided that we had the right to take First Nations children from their communities, move them hundreds of kilometers, and in the words of former National Chief Phil Fontaine, take the Indian out of the child. In many ways, removing part of the soul. It's small wonder that that act alone has left its mark on communities. And those are communities, many of which have housing issues. 6, 7, 8 people in a house the size of many living rooms. Water that needs to be boiled. No economic opportunities. Huge sense of isolation. And other social issues often too painful to speak of. So you say, what can you do? What do you do? What do you do? What can you do? You may not have no connection whatsoever. Well, I'll tell you where we can start. And I can only tell you where we can start, which is just one of many ways, from the conversation I had with the chief of a community. He came to speak to me. He's a tough man. He's used to speaking to governments, and since we have 200 years of history plus, and much of it's not been very good, he's used to speaking directly to governments. And he isn't cowed by titles, by fancy boardrooms. But he looked across the table from me and he said, we had another youth suicide. Another young person in our community. She died. It was the 3rd relative of mine. It was the 8th youth suicide in this small family of communities in a very short period of time. Many of these are very small communities. And he looked at me and he started to shake. And he started to cry. And he said, I don't know what to do. He said he was going to quit, and realized there was no one to take his place. And so he looked across the table and said, I need your help. What do I do? Well, I'll be blunt with you, I didn't have an answer. And it would have been easy to say, well, you know, it's another level of government, to pass it over to some other minister and pass it over to somebody else who has some expertise. And you can rest assured I did all that. But I also said to him, I'll think about it for a couple of weeks and we'll see what we can do. Now, you can rest assured that it wasn't a ghost chance that I was coming up with the answer to anything in a couple of weeks. Nothing as complex as this. Nothing that would require somebody with some form of expertise, a lot of money, the power to go across all forms of jurisdiction, swoop in there, have the instant love of the community to make massive changes. No, that wasn't going to happen in a couple of weeks. And why should it? Because we've known about many of the challenges for a lot longer than a couple of weeks. So I wasn't going to have an answer in a couple of weeks. There was no magic here. So I redefined my challenge to, how do I make tomorrow a little brighter than yesterday for those children? Just make tomorrow a little brighter than yesterday. And I thought of different opportunities, and one that was already being used by others was the power of play, the power of sport. You know, that joy you get from leaving school or on the weekend, getting together with your friends and kicking a ball or playing hockey or dreaming of being a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You remember that? It's all right, they once won the Stanley Cup. It's all right. It's all right to laugh. That joy you get from play completely unstructured, maybe supervised, maybe not. Great physical activity. Great for the soul. Builds a sense of camaraderie and friendship. Gives you something to do. Takes your mind into a positive space, away from what it might be on. Away from where you are in life. Away from the room you share with 5 other people. Away from the home situation that you're afraid to talk about. Away from the future that doesn't look overly bright. Away from the future where most people in the community don't finish elementary school, let alone graduate from high school. So I wondered, and I spoke to some people, not just within government, but outside of government, who had had experience with bringing sports opportunities to different types of communities. Could we do this? And if we as government were the one that did it, if we alone were the ones that did it, would it find any acceptance? Remember, government has not necessarily been a savior in First Nations communities. Governments are responsible for a lot. For a lot. And for a lot that's not very good. So could we make tomorrow a little brighter than yesterday by bringing some sports opportunities, and who would do that? Who do you get to do that? Yeah, it's money, but it's more than money. You have to find some people who can train community members, because if it's not ultimately driven by the community, it will not last. If it's imposed from the outside, it won't have any staying power. If it's somebody else telling the community what to do, it's not going to go very far. So can we come up with some money? Can we come up with some people who will train community members, give them the power to organize, the authority to organize, the skills to bring their colleagues together in organized and unorganized play? Can we get them up there? Can we bring them back? And when we, the outsiders, leave, will it have staying power? Will it continue? And how will it continue? Don't worry, I've not let you off the hook yet. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. And so this little coalition was put together with some from government, but a lot outside. People who are giving of their time, giving of their expertise, giving of a little bit of money. And going up north and training community members. And donating some equipment. And providing some sports opportunities in communities that never had them before. Did it work? Well, it's still in its early stages, but the early signs are good. The early signs are good. Kids would stay in school and are staying in school for the full day so they can participate in the activities after school. Kids are going to school in the morning when they might not otherwise have because they know they have to participate in the activities after school. There haven't been any youth suicides in a number of these communities in the past number of months. There haven't been any. Now that's not an answer to the housing. And that's not an answer to the economic opportunities. And that's not an answer to those very painful social conditions. And that's not an answer to water that has to be boiled before you can use it. And that's not an answer for 200 years worth of history. But sometimes there isn't an easy answer. And it's too easy to say, well, it's too complex for me. I don't have the expertise. I don't have a role to play in this. I can't do anything about this, so I'm going to leave it to the next person. But answers begin somewhere. And this is a somewhere. It might not be the right somewhere. You might have a better somewhere. But it's a somewhere. It's a beginning. It's a start. And for at least this short period of time, it's having a positive effect. It's giving hope where there wasn't any. It's providing a little bit of fun where there wasn't any. It's providing what I always took for granted as a kid. The children who've never thought of it, let alone taking it for granted. And so what's your point in this? What's your role in this? Well, you have the power to make a connection with a young person in a far north community. You have the power through the internet, and they're getting linked up now, and many are already on broadband. You have the power to make a connection with a young person. You have the power to reach out and say, how are you doing? You have the power to say that you're from London. You're from another community. And you want to know how things are going. And you have the power to get involved and support, even morally, those organizations that are providing sports opportunities. You have the power to let the young boys and girls know that they're not alone, that we stand together, that we are all, whatever our cultural differences, whatever our language differences, wherever we happen to be from, however we've come here, whatever struggles we've been through or lack of struggles we've been through, we are all at once one. We are all a people. We're all together, and we've got to be together. Because we cannot succeed as a province, as a community, as a nation, unless we're all succeeding. It's not good enough if everybody in this room is succeeding and the ones we can't see aren't. That's not good enough. That's not success by any measure. So all I ask of you is make a connection. Find a name. Find a person. Reach out. You can make a difference. You have the power to change. You have the power to change tomorrow and make it a little brighter than yesterday. And if we do that enough times for enough people, we're well on the road to permanent change. We're well on the road to hope. Hope, after all. Hope isn't a destination. Hope is the prospect that tomorrow you'll find the happiness that you can't find today. Let's do it. We can do it together. Thank you very much.